Hey nerds, what's up? So I wanted to talk a little bit about the Stormlight RPG. I was a backer for that when it came out on Kickstarter, and I was pretty excited as a longtime D&D player to play it and experience it, and I just want to talk about it a little bit today. I thought that would be kind of fun. I did recently have the chance to play a long one-shot over at the Shard of Opportunity, and that episode should be out by the time this is coming out, so I'll link that here and in the description box. It was such a fun time and might give you an idea of what it's like to play and also some other familiar faces from the Cosmere community. After that experience though, I really want to talk about how it felt to learn the system and how it felt to play. So I wanted to do that today. Just for some context, I have been a D&D player for about a decade, both as a player in one-shots, really long campaigns and medium-length campaigns, and also as a DM. So I feel like I am pretty familiar with Dungeons and Dragons as an RPG, and so that's kind of where I'm coming from going into the Stormlight RPG. Now, the one-shot that we played was a one-shot that we did at level 6, which if anyone knows Dungeons and Dragons, playing an RPG for the first time as a level 6 character is a little tough. So I do think that will take into account, and obviously by no means am I some expert on the Stormlight RPG. This is just my experience after learning how to play and then one playthrough. So this is more like first impressions than like a definitive statement about it. But that said, we'll talk about it after the jump. So first, let's talk about the system as a whole and its differences or similarities to Dungeons & Dragons. I'm doing that because I'm assuming most people's RPG experience would be D&D. I think they purposely designed this system to be easy for a D&D player to transition to. I saw so many touch points and similarities in some of the basics to kind of help you ease into a new system. The overall biggest thing I noticed was that it's just a less rigid system. I feel like it really encourages creativity both on the part of the players and on the GM. And I think this is both a huge pro and can sometimes be a con, but we'll talk about that more later. So you're gonna start off with race just like you normally would, except in this case, the options are much more limited. You're going to be a human or a singer, which makes sense, and those come with different things. And then in terms of what we would have called class in D&D, it's definitely a little bit different because you have paths is what they call it here. It's very similar in that you're choosing a selection of talents that you want. You've got scholars and fighter, you got things that you're used to. The biggest difference is because they also have this radiant path that you add on top of those other paths, and because they didn't want everyone to have to be radiant, they have changed it a little bit to make what you would essentially think of as multi-classing way easier without the drawbacks. Obviously in D&D, multi-classing can be really fun, but you miss out on some of the higher level attributes by doing that. In this case, the differences in the classes are much more fluid, and you're able to easily take on skills that you want from other places, meaning that there's just a lot of flexibility. This is what I was kind of talking about earlier about creativity. There's so much flexibility in the builds you can make, and I think you can make like hyper specific builds because of that. And I do think it's a super interesting thing to build into the system and something I was super interested in. They also try to offset the whole need for being radiant by making being radiant expensive. Like you have to spend a lot of your talent points to become radiant, and it's story driven. So I do think that there was clearly thought there to knowing that if everyone's a radiant character, it might not be interesting. And we can talk about the success of that later. And you also have attributes very similar to in D&D, except these 6 ones are organized among 3 main areas. And one thing I thought was really cool was how you got a different basically armor class, a different armor class based on what the skill was. So, if you have high strength and speed, that would be more your traditional armor class. But there's these other ones, kind of like how in spells you would make a wisdom saving throw, but a little bit broader. So depending on what type of attack it is, are you actually using your strength, or are you using your speed? Are you using your wits to deflect this attack? And I really like how that played out. I think that was very cool, especially in a system where they're obviously not going to want you to have to only be a strong person, a fighter. I understand it's pretty similar, but I just really thought it was a slick mechanic in the way that they had set it out. And then the turns are different. They do not use an initiative-based system, but rather a slow and fast-based system. A lot of board games definitely use. I think Gloomhaven is the game I recently played that used that. I'm pretty sure it was Gloomhaven, I can't remember. Where you can choose to do a fast turn where you get 2 actions versus a slow turn where you get 3 actions. I also think their action economy is really spelled out very nicely and easily and offers the opportunity for a lot of, again, creativity. Overall, I found most of the actual play and more like the new attributes to be pretty intuitive. The way they work investiture into it and focus into it, like, made a lot of sense if you're coming from a Dungeons and Dragons background. I think it wasn't very hard to adjust to those slightly different rules. For example, in combat, you roll your damage with your hit dice because you have more opportunities to damage. Things like that are just a little different, but once you kind of get the sense of them, they're very intuitive and work well. So let's talk about what I particularly liked in my experience playing. And I already talked about this a little bit, but I just love that encourages so much creativity. It's a lot more customization. So for example, there are times when you can take on skills. And when I was making my character, I kept looking like, where's the skill list? Where's the skill list? Like, I just could not figure it out. And then I was like Googling things and it was like, oh, you're just supposed to come up with skills. Like, they definitely have some skills they'll give you, but then it's like, work with your GM to come up with a specific skill that you guys agree upon, and then you have it. And that's a little scary at first, but then also was like, oh, I can really customize my character's backstory, really make my character sheet and my abilities reflect the idea I have in my head. And I think that's super cool. It reminded me a ton of this meme I saved like to Pinterest. This is how long ago it was, like years and years ago. I'm gonna see if I think I can find it. And it like basically shows the difference about, you know how when you make your first D&D character and it's like very basic, and then by your 6th campaign, you're making the most crazy characters because you're just getting wild. So this kind of thing that allows baked in to the system so much creativity, to me speaks for like the longevity of being able to play it, which I just think is really cool. I also love in the same way that skills and events are baked in to be storytelling elements. So particularly with the Radiants, for example, if you want to progress as a Radiant, you have to swear ideals, and you can only swear ideals basically if your GM agrees in a moment. Like, you have to have a moment where the GM kind of rewards you with a new ideal, because it has to be a cool enough moment or a story moment that would make sense for you to swear an ideal. And that's sort of like baked into the system of wanting there to be a story with emotional elements is just cool in my opinion. In the same vein, I love their injury table. This is such a weird thing to love, but when I was reading it, it didn't even matter really. And obviously in a short campaign, their injury table, it's pretty hard, I think, to die. In D&D, you can die, and that's pretty much it. You either fully die or you come back. In this case, if you reach 0 hit points, there is an injury table you have to roll on to decide how permanently injured you are from this and what that outcome will be. I love this from an RPG perspective, but I particularly love it from a Stormlight Archive perspective. The Stormlight Archive is a series that is all about taking hardships and injuries, whether they're physical, mental, emotional, and how you can change them and they become a part of you and influence others for good. And so the fact that that is baked into the system, such a significant portion of the Stormlight Archive story, I think is a very cool thing to bring to the system that shows kind of like the care they put into making it feel like the Stormlight Archive. I know it's a little thing, but I was just really impressed by it. Before I go on to the next section, I do want to say something I feel neutrally about in terms of the system. Like, it's neither good nor bad. Something I just feel like I noticed, again, on my limited experience, which is I think the Stormlight RPG would play much better in a long campaign than a one-shot because of that storytelling element. Like, when I was doing the one-shot, I had all these great ideas for my character, and I was like, well, none of these are really going to be useful in a one-shot. You just don't really have the time with a lot of other characters in a one-shot to do anything character-wise. And it does feel like the way the Stormlight RPG is set up, it is very character-focused. It is very creatively motivated on your characters. And so I think that would really shine in long campaigns where you get to develop that. But that big element you can't really utilize as well in a one-shot. Something I noticed that as being different than when I've done D&D, which I feel like can kind of lend itself either way. That actually leads in kind of perfectly to one of the concerns I had. So I'm saying this section as concerns I had and not things I disliked, only because I have not played it enough to know. I feel like it took me 3 campaigns to know what I really disliked about the D&D system. I think it's much easier to see the things you like, but concerns I have just from like playing the one shot goes into that last thing, which is, I don't know the answer to this. I'm sincerely asking this. Would this be easier or harder for new players to play in terms of new to RPGs because of how open-ended and creative it is? On the one hand, it's like, I feel as a new player, I would feel very overwhelmed that I was expected to be so creative. Like as I showed that meme, like I feel in general, you just kind of play a little bit more by the book and you don't get crazy and creative until you're a little bit more comfortable with the system. And so I feel like if I was completely new to RPGs, would it feel difficult to do that? And in the same vein, I feel like this system asks more of its GMs because it's so open-ended and because it relies a lot on the GMs to make cool creative moments in companionship with their players. I feel like it would be easier for an experienced GM to do that. On the other hand, maybe that's not true at all, and the creativity makes it easier. I don't know. It's just something I thought of while I was wading through making a level 6 character for the first time. I also still can't help but wonder what it's like if you decide to not be Radiant in this game. I can't say for sure. We were only level 6 characters. It was just a one-shot, one experience. But I already got the inkling like, being Radiant is pretty helpful. It gives you access to a lot of abilities, and I'm still not convinced that the ease in multi-classing, I know it's not really what it is, but you know what I mean, is really going to make up for that. Perhaps at lower levels it's obvious, or at higher levels it's obvious how that scales. It's also hard to tell, because in that one shot, we had non-Radiant characters and Radiant characters. And it just felt to me that it may become unbalanced unless you're really careful about how you make your non-Radiant character. That's unfounded right now, because like I said, it's only one, but I would be curious as I continue to play it to see how that ends up shaking out. The last thing is kind of this idea of Cosmere players versus no familiarity players. The Radiant system was very intuitive to me because I have read the Stormlight Archive, so it makes sense. But I did have this thought like, would this be a confusing mechanic if you were someone who had never read the Stormlight Archive and you came into this just as an RPG system? How likely is that? I don't know. Is this RPG system really for just Brandon Sanderson fans who also love RPGs, or Brandon Sanderson fans who have never RPG'd before and this is a great opportunity? Or do they expect it to be a standalone system? I don't really know what their goals are, but I would love to know. Like, I would love for someone who's never read the Stormlight Archive to play through the Stormlight RPG and just see how intuitive it is. Because I do think a lot of my intuitiveness comes from my familiarity with having read the books. You've seen it play out already. Because in regular Dungeons & Dragons, of course, you don't need to know the lore of Faerun. You don't need to have read all this, but like the Forgotten Realms, that's what I'm trying to think of. You don't need to know any of that, it's fine. So I wonder if that's the same here. I don't know. It's just something I thought of, just because the Radiant stuff, there's kind of a lot there. But on that other thing is like, there's a ton of spoilers for the Stormlight Archive in this. So that's also kind of interesting, is like, just a reminder. I don't know. I don't think you should discourage somebody who's never read the Stormlight Archive from playing it though for that reason. One, because it's very likely you won't pick up on the spoilers in a meaningful way when you're playing a game like this. Like, unless you're reading the entire book top to bottom, which I kind of did, but I feel like most players don't. And two, there are so many properties where I've gotten spoiled for things I thought I didn't care, and then I was interested enough to just go read or watch the thing anyway, and it was a totally fine experience. That's kind of weird. That's in concerns I had. It's just more about like the marketability of it. I don't think it's an over concern, but it is something to think about. There are spoilers in the course of character creation. Overall, I had a really great time with it. As you can tell, I really enjoyed mainly the extra creativity, and of course playing as a part of a system of a book series you love is also just very fun to feel like you're adding to that lore, and kind of experimenting in that world is very enjoyable. I definitely want to play again. It made me like more excited to play it. I think originally I didn't know necessarily if it would offer something that much more interesting to me than regular D&D, but because of those creative aspects, it made me very excited to go try to play it again, especially for a longer campaign. That's what I'm hoping to do, just because it did feel so new and fresh. So there you go. If you were curious, if you bought the stuff and you wanted to know what it played like, or you were unsure if you wanted to get the digital copy and play through it, that was my honest opinion of it, how I felt playing it one time. I'd love to know how you guys feel about it if you've already played it. If you enjoyed the Shard of Opportunity kind of podcast style that we did, let me know. I thought this would be kind of a fun thing to put out because right now I'm at Dragonsteel Nexus 25. I mean, not because this is a Wednesday and it starts Thursday, but I'm there. So I thought it'd be fun to talk about something Cosmere while I'm at DSNX. If you're also at DSNX, I hope I get to say hi. And yeah, if you like this kind of content, please like and subscribe. That's the best way to support me. And if you want to see what I'm currently reading, as well as other nerdy rants, you can check me out on Instagram at bookborn.reviews. I'll see you next time. Bye.